wouldn't exist. You know, we are actually blessed to have three fairly strong competitive telephone companies, and you know, I hope the restructuring of AT&T doesn't mean they're not thinking about being competitive, because we benefit from the competition a lot. Some of the things that are rolling out, or at least you hear right now, there's GCI and the others are looking at terrestrial fiber and terrestrial microwave to replace the satellite stuff. So, and essentially bringing broadband everywhere. And we have a state broadband task force that's working on that. So there may be some opportunities there. There's two projects that are proposed, and I actually, you know, you talk about inevitables. You know, when you think a lot about the Arctic Ocean, as it was my job to do as chair of the Arctic Research Commission, I had made the brash statement that someday we're going to do it, you know, fiber across the Arctic Ocean. And Bob Walp, who was the first chairman of GCI, picked that up and started, you know, giving speeches about it. Well, that was, you know, 10 or 12 years ago. Now we have two ventures that are actually looking at linking Asia and Europe through the Arctic that could bring broadband service to the north and western coasts of Alaska. To me, that's very exciting. You know, should we be writing checks for it? I'm not sure. Should we be looking at it and make sure that the regulatory scheme is there so that people can go get financing? Absolutely. And we're doing that. So, you know, that's one. I think, you know, one of the very exciting things, and I don't know if anybody has done this, I haven't looked at it, but I will tell you this. I did two statewide cellular business ventures in my career. And in both of them, the people who make switches told you that you needed a switch basically in every community. When we first got Nextel Live here, and you know, we never marketed it here, but if you were an Nextel roamer, you could turn on your phone in Anchorage and it worked. I was running it off a switch in the lower 48 and using fiber, and doing a lot of work with AT&T to make sure that we had the latency, that the signal wasn't going to get clogged in the switches getting here. And GCI figured out how to put the switch on a PC. And so we went from being told by Motorola that if you wanted to serve a place like Bethel, it was going to cost you $6 or $8 million, to GCI figuring out how to do it for 100,000 bucks. Now, you happen to have a whole lot of technicians in the state of Alaska who understand how to do that because they've built it out around the country. Well, it's a big world out there, and you ought to be selling that service. Or, I mean, that's an opportunity to sell that service in Africa, sell that service in Siberia. The governor of Chukotka was saying, we're still not doing what we ought to be doing in telecommunications when I met him recently. So, you know, our strong local market for some of these things may be global markets someplace else. So those are just three. Another one I like to talk about, and it's something that we've never done well, is if you study the LEO networks, the Iridium and Globalstar, they are networks that just by their configuration, if I had a globe here, they're in polar orbits. Iridium has 66 satellites. At any given time, 1/6 of those satellites, 11 of them are over our head. They turn off all but 2 of them to save power. But, you know, and the network is configured so that if you're in Papua New Guinea or someplace near the equator, you've got at least 1 over your head to work at all times. Well, we've got 11. Well, what are we doing to take advantage of that multi-billion-dollar infrastructure over our heads? You know, and what are the other Arctic countries doing about that? And the U.S. is about to be anchor customer for the next generation. So what policy should we be thinking about for the Arctic on that? So those are 3 or 4, and there's more to come.
Satellite broadband, yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Alan?
Is there an opportunity for some of these state governments to archive strategic public-private relationships that are successful? So you got a kind of a best practices that other people can, some measuring examples that other people can start copying? And I think specifically like the refinery that was done up in the interior. Dan Krause hired Frank Ballon. They got a 90-day pay with the state for the oil.
Right.
66 million cash flow. His budget was 60, so they built 36 million.
Right.
So you got the creation of value added.
Oh, yeah, and the story, not only of the Fairbanks refinery, but even the first Kenai refinery that Wally used to tell, and even the way the Petrostar refinery was built. You know,
Everybody says you can't do it, even though these things have been done before. How do we archive those so people understand how it works and we can replicate things?
If you're going to start a pipeline tomorrow, and you want to know everything that's been studied on the route of your pipeline, there's one library down at the Federal Building called ARLIS, which is the resources library. If you want to look at business plans, that have happened, some have worked, some have not. I was telling somebody before we came in that somewhere in my garage is the original business plan for the Alaskan Brewery, where I could have had 5% for $5,000, and I wish I'd done it. But the point being, I don't know that there's a place private, but it might be a good idea. There's also a lot of ASTF material that kind of looked at some of these things. Some of it's in Ada, and here I am on a campus where there's a bunch of bright business school professors in the room. Maybe we try to encourage something like that to happen.
What are the best practices from ASTF? It's in Ada.
Yeah.
Who do you talk to in Ada to find out the history?
I'm trying to get the university that's trying to work on commercializing their patents to see if they can take on some of that too. So, yeah, it's a good question.
So what did you say, Alan? Ada has the ASTF?
Ada has the ASTF stuff, yeah.
So much of that nobody ever moved on. And there were some, I sat on the board for 2 years as well.
Well,
There were some darn good
hey, I was eating birch
ideas.
syrup ice cream for dessert last night and showing it off to a non-Alaskan, and that was an ASTF project. My dog gets yummy chummies,
Yep.
and we had several projects like that at ASTF.
But there were quite a few others
Yeah.
that failed because they didn't have business acumen.
Right, and that was actually one of the major things. We'd sit on the ASTF board and say, if this were a pure VC board, we'd have fired the CEO.
Right.
The state can't fire its grantees, thank goodness, and shouldn't, but that was an issue. Steve, and then,
You alluded to just a second ago one of the things I was thinking about. What should K-12 education, what should the universities be doing different than what they're doing now that would help move the state forward? And you mentioned voc ed, which is happening.
right.
And you just alluded to a particular project. Do you have other thoughts for anything in education?
I'd say that two I'm thinking about a lot are voc ed and STEM education, and then I will just tell you, I love the things that kind of take the mystery away from starting a business. So whether it's the Lemonade Day for youngsters, or DECA, which is, runs the school stores in different schools, or junior achievement and those sort of things. I love those programs too. Let me talk about STEM, or as Representative Alan Dick, who chairs the Education Committee in the House, is arguing that it should be STEAM, because it should be science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. But Harrison Schmitt, who was the last man to set foot on the moon, said to a group of school kids here one time that mathematics is the universal language. The Pythagorean theorem works in Chinese just as well as it works in English. All right? And the fact is that if we work hard to make sure that our kids understand math, it means that, the very simple language of business is, does it add up? Does the outgo equal the income? And is there a return on investment? And so forth. And a facility with mathematics helps with that. It pains me greatly to go, sometimes work faster than the adding machine when I'm checking out, but the checkout clerk doesn't know that 10% of $1.95 is 19.5 cents, I mean, we really, really ought to be much more proficient in math than we are now. There's a number of very cool STEM projects, and it's I've described it as a veritable garden without a policy. And we're looking to see what kind of STEM policy we can have. And I think what the governor's done with the performance scholarships is an incentive going over the heads of the school boards to get kids to think about the advantage of doing advanced placement. If you guys run a tech business, take a page from Scott Keeney, who owns a firm called Elite down in Vancouver area. He makes lasers, but he told every single one of his engineers, that your job is to go out in the schools, and they tripled the number of kids in the Vancouver and Portland area taking AP classes. The STEM, I'm not sure exactly the name of it, but Exxon has decided to basically focus its charitable giving in Alaska on that objective. And there's the Southeast Conference, the Juneau Economic Development Council statewide is working on that. And there are very fun projects from Lego robots to build a plane. The kids in Chivac took the carcass of a Super Cub and flew it, fixed it up, built an airplane out of it, flew it to Anchorage and flew it to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the air show last year. So there are opportunities like that. And in business, if you can help education, I'd say helping kids get proficient on that helps.
And what should the
Yeah.
the university from big vision, like the universities improve the health education with the obvious need in that area. Are there, what else should the university system be doing?
Well, the first thing I think a university, or one word that I use a lot on the State Committee on Research is that you want your university to be as porous as possible with knowledge, okay? That means bringing practical people in to teach. It means taking your best academics and getting them out into the community and having good ties with business and government and the nonprofit sector as well. Because there is not anything we do in Alaska that is not a knowledge-based industry. I don't care if it's showing tourists melting ice. This is a place where our economy is built on knowledge, all right? And so we've got to respect what research does for us. We have to recognize that things invented here, I've mentioned a couple of businesses that have turned into, billions of dollars worth of activity, all right? The inventors were basically tinkerers. They were basically bachelor's degree guys. Some of them didn't even have college degrees. But I mentioned I wasn't going to make a digital watermarking investment until I went to the media lab at MIT and asked Negroponte, is this anything? Kind of like David Letterman's old shtick. Is this anything? And he says, yeah, it is. And he didn't invent it, but he knew it was needed. And he did that. And so a university can also help the entrepreneur, understand the market, understand the thing. I mean, I can tell you right now, we've invested millions of dollars into a technology which we know it works, we kind of know why it works, but we're not entirely sure why it works. And so I went to a couple of our smart young techs and I said, part of your pay is going to be to go write some peer-reviewed papers on this. And one kid wrote one and ended up getting a scholarship to go to Rochester in imaging based on the paper he did on the work that he did for us, because I want to know why it works. And the university can help you with that. And the other thing that's fun about a university and important about a university is that it becomes a knowledge exchange. And I told the story at Digimarc of how we were beating our heads against the wall with the American Banknote Company. But because we put up on the internet what we thought we were trying to do in the early days of the internet, our $30 million customer found us. And so, that's kind of the proliferation of knowledge. So I'm not going to say specifically, do we need a maritime training program or oil and ice or all those things? The answer is yeah to all those things. But I would say that the overall approach that we as Alaskans have to have toward our university is it helps us grow our business and grow our people to be competitive in our businesses and grow our knowledge. And the university has to understand it's got that broad role as well.
You referred a little bit earlier, and I think it was specific to the Switch service, about taking things global, perhaps taking the technology that has been very effective here in Alaska, global to Africa and that sort of thing. Can you expound on that a little more?
Sure.
I wanted to remind you that you said that I was next, so please let me.
I apologize.
Sorry.
Okay. The question is how do you grow strong, take a strong local market and make it go global? I'll just give you a couple ideas. Prudhoe Bay was such a huge oil field for the oil industry that at the time of the build out of Prudhoe Bay, we had some of the world's best and brightest here helping, do things like 3D modeling in that field and so forth. John Brown, who became the chairman of British Petroleum worldwide, basically his project while he was a youngster posted in Alaska was getting a 3D reservoir model of Prudhoe. Some of the consultants that he used here who were local data processing consultants or local data visualization consultants now sell that technology to oil fields around the world. Linden Transport, another good example. They are a company that dealt with very complicated logistics in Alaska and realized that their knowledge of serving remote places could serve many other places in the world, and they do. So I guess what I would say is that there's sometimes things that we've got here where people don't realize they have world markets, where you can go to them and say, hey, this is something, you know, I used as a hypothetical example, GCI, you know, setting up cell systems in remote villages for much, much less money than even what anybody would have told you could have done it for 10 years ago. And how that's got to have global demand.
South Sudan,
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I want to connect this, connect the dots.
Right. So I guess the point is this, is that when you, if you read Michael Porter's cluster theory, and there's people who argue with it, and that's fine, that's what good theory is about, is to argue about it, but in his theory it says, one of the things that made Swiss watches is that you had strong local market, you had kind of a porous business where you might work for watch company A for a part of your career and watch company B for a part of your career. The area grew a reputation. Quality was there because people knew things and standards were set in the community and so forth. And that happens here in Alaska right now on mapping. I mean, ESRI, the biggest GIS company, Jack Dangerman started in Anchorage, Alaska doing maps for Lydia Selkirk. Okay? Sometimes we're able to capture the global market, sometimes we're not. But the fact is that our strong local markets, we tend to have money to pay for things that others don't. We get through the pioneering, and then you can take it other places. So I don't have an instant prescription, but I can tell you that that's certainly one place to look for opportunities. I apologize for skipping. Go ahead.
I actually have a question that's related to oil and drilling, because
Okay.
we've talked about how that's important in the state. And clearly, I am aware that it's keeping our economy healthy right now.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm worried about the future of our state and world. I'm worried about the ability to continue having transportation options as well as our personal health. And I've been to places like California, New York, and Germany where the air is so polluted it's difficult to breathe, and the water is also difficult to drink because they have had so much use of oil technology. And I was wondering, basically, as a finite resource and keeping a conservative policy on using finite resources, is there any plans to invest in any kinds of non-oil-based technology so that we can conserve our oil resources?
Well, I could probably add up what we're spending right now as a state on renewable energy technology, and either at the proof of concept end, where we're supporting things like new kinds of tidal power or geothermal power. There was $12 million in the state budget last year to help the guys prove up Mount Spur, to what we're doing with Susitna and some of the other wind diesel projects all over the state and so forth. I think Alaska looks lovingly, I guess, at the Norwegian policy, which says export hydrocarbons at high prices and do as much as you can to go to long-term low-cost or declining cost renewables in the country. And we have a policy that's aiming toward a greater percentage of that. I can tell you when I was had a national office and it was very intimately involved in climate change research, that the policy that the nation was following at the time was certainly to pay attention to understanding climate change, but recognizing that you either had to have a government leviathan, I mean literally somebody to tell you what to do at every moment, right, which is a price that I'm not willing to pay, or advance our technologies so that ultimately we have the right kind of things available. And you know, I just was at a car show when, you know, we had a long weekend in Washington for a Secretary of State meeting, and I went to the car show, and you still can't buy a car run on batteries in this country that goes more than 90 miles. Well, that won't get me to Girdwood and back from Eagle River, okay? So I'm not going to make that my family car right now. I can't, right? But should we be, you know, investing, and I can tell you that we took some of our money at Immersive Media and we invested in an electric vehicle company. We've invested in a clean coal company. I see absolute opportunity in that over time, but I will also just say to you that when it comes to a choice of rulemaking over here with a government hat on, or entrepreneuring over here with an entrepreneuring hat over here, I would much rather be over here because I think it's going to be entrepreneuring and engineering that's going to solve the problem. It's not going to be Leviathan government.
So you would be in favor of supporting people who are from Alaska working on technology that is non-oil based, especially as it would be an example of the rest of the world, perhaps with more than 12 million, seeing as the amount that is invested in Alaskan students learning about oil technologies. I don't know how many hundreds or billions of dollars is invested in that versus 12 million on geothermal technology, but it seems like we could invest more in rail systems, which they use in Germany and all the other countries.
Oh, sure.
In
Yeah.
Anchorage, and that people commuting, for instance, from Palmer, we could have a nice rail system that would be very fast, a super fast train or something from Fairbanks, that we could cut down on our aviation.
We've made tremendous progress in recent years on lots of phases of this. We spend more money on retrofitting and conservation than any other state, and have for a long time. Okay, AHFC, a large portion of our AHFC profits go into helping folks retrofit and do conservation there. We've got groups like the Cold Climate Housing Research Center in Fairbanks I'd urge you to go see. I have spoken at probably half a dozen at least in my 14 months as Lieutenant Governor at renewable energy conferences on wood and biomass and algae and wind and geothermal and so forth. And there's significant amounts of money going in all that. So I'd be happy to sit down with you and show you the whole catalog. But the fact is that there's more opportunity. And the point I made when we had the the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Policy up here is that if you're spending 45 cents a kilowatt hour in a remote Alaska village, when the clearing price for power is somewhere around a dime or less in the lower 48, and you want to test a renewable technology, you can show it, you can do it economically here where it's 45 cents, a whole lot easier than where it's 10 cents here, shake out the kinks, and make this economic for this part of the country. And we are the world's leader in application of wind diesel right here in Alaska because of that price disparity. So there is tremendous opportunity for you as an entrepreneur to work in that field and to find niches. And the state is being very, very helpful in a number of different ways, and we don't have to attack oil to do it. Hey.
I'm wondering if you could look into your crystal ball a little bit and talk about the role that entrepreneurship and free enterprise could play in solving some of the serious problems that we have in some of those rural and remote communities.
That's a very good question. The first thing I would say that we've got in rural Alaska right now is we've got several what I'll call kind of well-funded institutions that you know we have put there, or the federal government has put there, that are now beginning to work a lot better. Then everybody has growing pains. But we have tribal governments. We have tribal health consortiums. We have school districts, which are very local in organization. We have village corporations under ANCSA. We've got local governments under our Constitution. So those are, I can go into any village and know that I've got at least those 5 different folks to meet with wherever I go. And a lot of times they've got similar boards of directors or assemblies or whatever, and so forth. The kinds of problems that they're dealing with are education, basic infrastructure, suicide, domestic violence, sexual assault, finding a core economy to keep people employed and in the village, having enough wildlife to stay, you know, whether it's fish on the Yukon or moose in Minto, to maintain a different lifestyle. And are there opportunities for these groups to, you know, for maybe putting young men to work on and energy costs? I should have added that, and I should have added the energy entities in these villages as well. So you've got 6 or 7 different groups there, many of the same people, sometimes in a place of less than 1,000 folks, where you've got some strong social problems, some strong economic problems, and some major subsidies coming into the community to keep things going, basically. There's almost always also an air service and a post office and you know, that sort of thing. So are there ways you can get these